Hello, everybody. It's Justin Case of SNSWS, rejoining our friend Scott Dudley with a brand new feature we're bringing over to this channel from one of our primary channels, America Newscape. And this is called Magic 8 Ball. We did our initial broadcast on America Newscape, and we thought it deserved a different home, and we brought it over here, and we're excited to share it with you. So, Scott, are you ready for this? You want to tell us what it's all about?
I am. So the premise is this: the eight ball is right,
Yeah.
and and that in itself is kind of funny because we got Chat GPT, we've got all these sources of information. We didn't never need any of that stuff. All we needed was to know how to ask a yes or no question, and then the eight ball is going to tell you. As long as you're sincere, as long as you concentrate, the eight ball tells you. So here's how we play the game. We come up with random questions, and I go to the dog park and I say, hey, it's Friday. Anybody got any eight ball questions for me? And I get some. And Justin's got his own sources. I'm sure he's got his own little group of people that, or his magical mind. Anyway, if it's Scott's question from the dog park, then I'll ask the question. We'll go to the handy dandy eight ball and shake me, and it shakes, and then it gives you an answer. Okay, and that'll be the answer to the question. Here's where it gets cool. Justin will explain why that's the correct answer, and that's the magic of the eight ball. So not only is the eight ball always right, but it's like, what, Justin has a background in baseball. This reminds me so much of playing Pepper, because like when the batting coach is firing ground balls at you, and you got to come up with a ground ball and get it back, and then they're firing another one at you, and it's like it really does help us in terms of learning how to think relatively.
Well, absolutely. And, we didn't know what we were getting into, and we laughed our way through it. And the Magic 8 Ball was the star of the show because our shortcomings, our inability to ask a direct, reasonable question made it that much funnier.
That was a real learning moment, wasn't it?
It was. It was. And we had a good time, and the audience had a good time. We think you'll enjoy it here. So, Scott,
Ready to play the game?
I'm ready.
All right, I got a question. It's a dog park question.
Uh-oh.
Um, about a week or so ago, maybe a little bit longer, 8 women, all fairly wealthy, went up into a space capsule. The question from the dog park for the eight ball was, are these women now astronauts?
Okay.
The eight balls are shaken. And the answer is, cannot predict now.
Well, that's good, 8 Ball, because that would have been a rough one for me to agree with had you made the wrong answer.
Oh, yeah. No, I was, when she asked me my opinion, I was like, no, it's just a bunch of rich people who floated weightless for a couple seconds.
Okay, now I get to ask Scott a question, and
All right.
it's not from the dog park, it's from the windmills of my mind, but is Kurt Vonnegut a talented author?
All right. Shake again. Eight balls are shaken. And better not tell you now.
Yeah, you can't handle the truth.
So no, wait. I got this. So the reason the eight ball is saying can't tell you now is because it doesn't want to break my heart. No,
Yeah, exactly.
That's not the reason. That's not it. It's because talent and authorship. And we were talking earlier about on the other one about Melville's magic as a writer. Well, he wasn't recognized that way when he was writing. He was recognized as good, but he wasn't recognized as top echelon, one of the best ever. So Vonnegut passed, I think, about maybe 15 years ago, somewhere around there. And just now, it's like his work is continually being re-examined. And ultimately, I think if you're talking about, you know what, when we talked about musicians, I got this. We talked about performers versus people who were musically savvy and were able to kind of do amazing things with music, and some rare performers who actually had that musical ability too. I think with Vonnegut that he was not a good technical writer. He was good at capturing how people think in bursts and in half sentences, and throwing out dirty words occasionally to make it spice it up. But he wasn't necessarily a really strong technical writer. Right? So he wasn't putting perfectly formed grammatical sentences back to back to back to back and creating this masterpiece. He was throwing out the little jabs, little vibes, little quickies, short paragraphs, crazy, unconnected chapters. And at the end of the day, you get a story that you could relate to. At least I could relate to it.
Well,
And
well, your argument is if he studied for his works, I think that's one of the highest acclaims an author can have. I mean, if we look at Shakespeare, probably the most studied author in history, it always leaves me wanting. But it's studied. I mean, for its time, you know,
well, he
a,
was precise.
yeah.
Although, indeed, there's speculation that he was ghostwriting for Francis Bacon.
No wonder I never liked Bacon or Chaucer or
There
any
you
of
go.
those. But there you go.
Oh,
Okay.
Chaucer was hard. But Vonnegut had this lived experience that made him a different kind of writer, and he was a prisoner of war in World War II. He was his family was German immigrants who totally in World War I totally swore off of anything connected to German. So he lost his cultural heritage. They had a brewery that got shut down by Prohibition. And so they went from being fairly wealthy, successful people to really struggling to survive. He ended up in World War II. He survived the firebombing in Dresden, Germany, which is where the book Slaughterhouse-Five came from, and came back and did a lot of things, but struggled as a writer, a lot like Van Gogh, perhaps. He was doing a lot of writing, he wasn't selling anything. And eventually, in his later middle age, some of his earlier work started catching on. And then he became more of kind of a walking around person who tried to keep producing at the level of his earlier work. And, like the rest of us, the Rolling Stones' new album is not that good.
Well,
Because you've
yeah.
got a certain spark, you get a certain creative spark, and it hits at a certain time. And after that, you're just kind of trying to figure out where you're at.
Well, if anybody deserved to rest on their laurels, it might be the Rolling Stones. But okay.
Well, they're resting on the African American blues laurels of southern United States.
Okay. Well,
They
Scott.
they spice it up.
Well, better get back to why we're here. Scott, you got another question from the dog park?
I do. I have an interesting question. Is humanism a dead branch of human cultural society? So
Whoa,
are
whoa,
we
whoa.
ready to ditch? Are we ready to ditch humanism
Why don't you?
and just acknowledge that the Enlightenment was a joke, and we should have stopped paying attention at that point?
That's a question better suited for you to defend, Scott.
Well, the eight ball may just slap this question into space.
Well, that's what I'm hoping
So
for.
that's the question. So in general, humanism, taking care of everybody and making the world better, raising literacy, raising all these things that the Enlightenment thought that we could somehow manage to pull off. It's becoming pretty clear, it seems, that isn't really as easy as it first appeared, and that many people are more than happy living out their lives without kind of taking this pedal to the metal approach of learning.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So let's see what the 8 ball says, and then we'll just okay. 8 ball is shaken. And we got an answer, and it is very doubtful. You have to support humanism. Bummer that.
Well, I believe humanism was a theory that, in theory, held a lot of promise. So, since it hasn't necessarily been fulfilled, could we argue that we're still in the process of keeping humanism alive? How's that for saying very little about nothing?
I think that's a really kind of wise potential perspective. And so the eight ball probably nailed it again. Although it's interesting because it's like the whole optimist pessimist thing, right?
Right.
And so there's always going to be an optimist in the room because it's a sliding scale. And so whoever is like the person holding out that little thread of hope, that's your optimist. If everybody else is gone.
Yeah, the least pessimistic person would be the optimist in the room.
Exactly. And so ultimately, there's going to be somebody saying, "Yeah, there's a postmodernist society that somehow we're going to get into, and everybody's going to, sing kumbaya and share bread, and we hope to be able to survive all the other stuff to get to that point, right?"
Well, maybe. And, at what cost?
Well, no, it's interesting because speaking of authors, how about H.G. Wells?
Oh gosh,
You
that
know,
was
when
that
when
was
he
one
did
of,
the Time Machine, he nailed it.
well, it's
It's
like,
like the people who were having utopia were getting eaten for dinner.
well, H.G. Wells really gave me my passion for reading as a child. I must have been 7 or 8, and War of the Worlds. It was, you just couldn't put it down.
No, I completely agree. And me being the science nerd, the island of Dr. Moreau was just like haunting and amazing and everything.
Well, but when I go back and read War of the Worlds, to me, it's adolescent. Was it written for children? Because it had a big impact on me when I was a child.
That's interesting. I think it was written for children. It was written for the 1950s, and ultimately that's when it hit its stride, even though he'd written it several decades before.
Well, yeah, it hit its stride when Orson Welles did the radio broadcast that swept the country.
And it would be interesting because if we go back in time and we were asking like media influences,
Yeah,
somebody might have said that because that shook up a lot of people.
it did. And,
You know
you know,
what? Orson forgot to use a sarcastic font.
well, there, let's just say there wasn't a lot of critical thinking on the other end of that radio broadcast.
Orson Welles, who almost blew up my movie Catch 22.
Yeah, there you
I,
go.
I, are you a big Catch 22 fan?
I enjoy it. I wouldn't say a big fan. I thought the book was better, but
Book was way better.
and I'm a huge Alan Arkin fan.
Yeah, Arkin is amazing.
Right.
But evidently Wells, who played the general or whatever, kept showed up and was complete high maintenance drama person, and everybody else selected for this film because they were all on this small island in Mexico for all this time. Were all picked specifically to get along with each other under these conditions. The director, Mike Nichols, I think, had gathered all of the people he knew would be able to kind of coexist over this long shoot. And Wells shows up and he's just got this whole list of things, and he doesn't want to do it this way, and he doesn't want to do it that way, and put a lot of pressure on the shoot. But an interesting movie, but a very good book.
All right, Scott. Let me ask you a question. Or let me
All
ask the
right,
Magic 8 Ball a question.
all right, easy one.
Okay. Are cats more intelligent than dogs?
Yeah. I could just leave the very doubtful up here, right? And we get out of this alive.
Come on, 8 Ball.
Oh, and it says without a doubt.
There you go. There you go, Scott. So explain to
So,
me why.
well, dogs are not intelligent. Because dogs, in fact, dogs have done some really remarkable things in terms of turning themselves. And look at human reaction to wolves. I mean, those of us who are far enough away from them can look at the wolves and go, "Oh, how pretty! They've got their little pack. They've got their little wolf puppies," and but people who are having to coexist with wolves have a whole different perspective on wolves' potential as predators, wolves' potential to disrupt livestock, and so they have a very different feeling about wolves.
Yes.
Well, dogs all used to be wolves. You see a dog, and you realize like 1,000 generations ago, this was a wolf, and now you got a Chihuahua, and now you've got a German Shepherd, and now you've got a Malinois, and now you've got like all the sniffer this or sniffer that dogs, and so dogs have managed to develop a symbiotic relationship with humans, and they get fed, and they get a safe home, and they get a hearth, and they get little booties for their feet when the pavement's warm. They've hooked up a pretty good gig by jumping through all these different hoops of expectations about what men want from them. And they've used their pack mentality to kind of hook us up, to kind of say, well, you're my mom, you're my dad, you're the head of the pack, and we need to, and I'll be your loyal, trusted companion. Okay, that's dogs. Cats didn't change crap.
And it's why they're brighter, right?
Cats and that is it. That is the true sign of intelligence is how did I get to be the person in the house that gets served with very little behavioral expectations. So if your cat is actually a good mouser, well, congratulations, because they're not all good mousers. Only the ones who want to be and who have an interest in that. So cats get their litter changed, they get food, they just hang out, they sleep 16, 17, 18 hours a day, and they're able to come up to you and give you pretty eyes and meow, and you're like, oh, my little cat, I love you so much. Come here. And this is intelligence. Getting the most for the least amount of effort. Cats look exactly like they looked. I mean, you've got long hair, short hair, et cetera, et cetera. Essentially, they are still the same animals that came out of Northern Africa and out of Asia thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, when cats and humans first started hooking up and deciding that we could live in each other's shadows. They haven't changed. They're still the same animals. You don't get Great Dane cats. You don't get Chihuahua cats.
So the manipulation skills are a sign of intelligence.
Well, okay, it's actually a neurology thing. Cats have the brain that is more like humans in terms of our emotional regulation and expression. So one of the things that happens whenever you're in a room full of people is your brain tries to read the vibe of the room. And so if you're in a room full of angry people, you instantly start kind of gearing up because your brain is trying to match itself. I mean, in Star Wars, the movie none of us liked, it was called using the Force.
There you go.
And ultimately, that's what brain entrainment is a thing. So brains try to figure out what's going on, and they entrain into that. Well, cats' brains and human brains are very, very similar. We don't have pack leader master stuff, neither us nor cats. And cats live kind of independently until you throw them all together, and then they're kind of live buddied up, a lot like humans do. So cats are able to have this natural advantage in terms of connecting with humans, because if you look at a cat, it's funny, I do, one of my nerdy hobbies is cat photography. And if a cat looks at you and they're mad, it doesn't take you two guesses.
Right.
All you have to do is look at the look in their eyes and go, oh, this is an angry cat, or this is a scared cat, or this is a cat that's happy. And that emotional connection. Cats don't meow in real life. If you put cats around other cats, they don't meow to each other. Meow is strictly hey, human, I'm here and I have a need. And they've developed that over the years. My
Well,
deaf cat meows at me.
well, if they're in heat, they will meow at each other.
Yeah, that's it. Well, and that's got its own little sparkle and its own little
Hmm.
tone in the meow, right?
Right,
It's a kind
right.
of a more demanding thing.
Well, communication, and cats really do try. If you have a symbiotic relationship with a cat, he will try and communicate with you, and every once in a while he'll look at you with the expression that he can't believe how stupid you are.
Cats are really routine based, and as long as you fall into their routines and they agree with the routines, cat life is pretty low stress. It's if you start violating the rules,
Yeah,
then you have a little kind of adjustment discussion time. But you know,
right.
I having lived in a multi-cat family, multi-cats are actually probably easier than single cats
Well,
because ultimately it's more of a not what the cat wants, it's what the community wants.
yeah, well, that makes sense. Well, Scott, do you think we've done enough for this first episode? And we do intend to continue it here.
I think we have, and I would suggest if you like what you're hearing, shoot us a comment and put an 8-ball question in the comment. We could definitely poach whatever ideas you've got out there. We're not
Absolutely.
doing we're not giving you the Kentucky Derby winner, and we're not doing political prognostication. But other than that, I think the 8-ball, because we don't want to take advantage of the 8-ball's good vibe. You
Well,
start asking the wrong questions, and it heads south.
well, exactly. And if it's too layered of a question, it will just put you off until you quit asking that question.
You know what? That helped us because the last time we did this, we actually had to go back and reformat a couple questions to kind of make it make sense to the 8-ball.
Well, right. We were scolded by the eight ball that our questions asking skills had left the eight ball wanting.
But we're growing.
We're growing.
Day by day, better.
Better, better, better. All right, everybody. Hey, thanks for joining us. Remember, additional information on links provided in this video is read more. Today's the day to subscribe to this channel. Please learn more about Scott Dudley and the Magic 8 Ball when time permits.